Yes. Yes. Good evening. I'd like to open tonight's regular planning board meeting for April 15th. Before we begin, I'd like to, now you got some microphone. I'd like to welcome Cindy Hayden, who is the Deputy City Manager. Welcome.
Yay. Thank you, Ken, very much.
Nice to have you joining us. Moving on tonight for the first item is the approval of minutes for the March 18th meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any changes, discussions, concerns? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Moving on right on to public hearings. A, the application of Islington Woods LLC for a lot located off Borthwick Avenue, Assessor Plan 234 as Lot 7-4A, and owned by Islington Woods LLC for a lot located off Barbary Lane, Assessor Plan 234 as at Lot 1, and owned by Northern Utilities Incorporated, wherein final subdivision approval is requested so as to subdivide two lots into three with the following. Proposed Lot 7-4B with an area of 3.478 acres in continuous street frontage off Borthwick Avenue. Proposed Lot 7-4A with a lot area of 6.488 acres in continuous street frontage off Borthwick Avenue, and proposed Lot 1 decreasing in area from 5.226 acres to 3.624 acres and having access off Barbary Lane and no continuous frontage off Barbary Lane. and with all proposed lots lying in Office Research District with a minimum lot area of 3 acres and 300 feet of continuous street frontage. Who'd like to address us tonight on this?
Good evening. My name is Bill Doucette from Doucette Survey. I'm representing Islington Woods LLC and Northern Utilities this evening for the proposed subdivision as stated. Currently, there are 2 lots, and as a result of the application...
Mr. Chairman, point of order. I just want to say that I'll be abstaining from this, so you'll want to know.
Certainly. Thank you.
And as a result of the application would be a total of 3 lots. At the last hearing on March 9th, we were furnished with some comments from the Planning Department and have had the opportunity to address the comments and meet with the Planning Department to review those and believe that we have satisfied the Planning Department's concerns.
Okay. Any questions? Seeing none? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the public who'd like to speak to, for, or against the application? Anyone in the public to, for, or against? Third time before I close the public hearing. David, anything on, I know we had 16 stipulations you feel comfortable that have gone through, or?
Mr. Chairman, we did receive a letter from the neighborhood. Do you want me to read it into the record?
Which,
or
please?
does every board member have it?
Excellent. Did everyone get a copy of that?
Yes.
Okay, then why don't we just take it as noted into the record?
From John Whiteman, and it's regarding the access with Barbary Lane, and the plan so reflects that condition.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Okay, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. Which pleasure, board?
I just wanted to confirm, if I may, Mr. Chairman, that the planning department agrees that the 16 stipulations have been met.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve this application as presented, and would also just like to remind the applicant that there is no access off Barbary Lane.
Okay. Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman, that's from lots 7-4A, is that correct?
Correct.
Not necessarily from lot 1.
Well, the way that would work is Barbary Lane would not be extended without additional approval.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to B, the application of the RLD Revocable Trust and AMD Revocable Trust for property located at 3201 Lafayette Road, wherein site plan approval is requested for the construction of a 2,926 square foot 2-story office building after removal of the existing office building with related paving, utilities, landscaping, drainage, and associated site improvements. Said property is shown on Assessor Plan 291 as Lot 7 and lies within a general business and garden apartment mobile home districts. Would like to address this evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Dennis Moulton with Millette Sprague and Colwell. The subject property is the site of the DeFossis Law Firm as well as the Portsmouth Mobile Home Park behind it, located off of Lafayette Road, just south of the intersection with Ocean Road. Total parcel area is over 208 acres, a large portion of which is wetland area. The area that we're concerned with is towards the front of the property off of Lafayette Road where the current DeFossis Law Firm office is located. It's currently approximately 1,200 square foot mobile structure being used as an office with a 680 square foot garage to the side of it. What we're proposing to do is to replace the mobile structure with a new two-story office structure to be used exclusively for the law firm. There will be no other tenants in the building. We have met the requirements of the zoning code in terms of the 105-foot setback from Lafayette Road. We are providing the required parking spaces, 15 for the site, including a handicapped accessible space. We provided a loading zone in accordance with the zoning ordinance, with screened dumpster area. We are providing a pad for motorcycle parking towards the end of the front parking lot, along with landscaping, which includes trees planted along the front of the area where now there exists, I don't think there exists any trees, it's mostly just a grassed area. All utility connections will be made underground, including water, sewer, and electrical. At the request of the Technical Advisory Committee, we have shown a sewer design. We believe the existing building may be currently connected to the sewer, but it was really indeterminate. We couldn't tell by various tests that we performed. So we are showing a new sewer line connected to an existing active sewer manhole down the street from the property, down the street on the same property, with a sewer lateral from the new building to that new line. We're not proposing any stormwater treatment or additional stormwater treatment for the property. Currently, there exists a well-vegetated buffer between this property and the wetlands adjacent to it. We believe that this will provide better treatment than anything we could construct at this time. There's a very small increase in flows due to the small increase in impermeable surface, and based on my calculations, should have almost a negligible effect on the existing wetland. At Traffic and Safety, at Technical Advisory Committee, we were referred to Traffic and Safety due the feeling that the two entrances to the site were too large for the current use. When we went to Traffic and Safety, we were requested to reduce the width of both entrances, which we provided a plan showing such a reduction to Traffic and Safety and again to Technical Advisory. When we applied to New Hampshire DOT for the driveway permits, we were instructed that we would, if we were going to affect both entrances, we would have to provide deceleration lanes for both entrances. In the subsequent Technical Advisory Committee meeting, being presented with that information, Technical Advisory Committee worked very well with us in coming up with a solution which we think is a good compromise, and that is to maintain the current width of the southernmost entrance, which is approximately 45 feet in width, and reduce the wider and more problematic, in the eyes of traffic and safety, entrance, which is approximately 70 feet in width currently, to a width of about 35 feet. We would provide a decel lane on the northbound, for the northbound traffic into the new reconfigured entrance. We went to Traffic and Safety this morning, and they approved the new configuration. I called Alan Garland of New Hampshire DOT this morning. He had not had a chance to review it at this point, and had not been able to furnish me with an answer one way or another as to the acceptability. So we would ask tonight that we receive approval for this with the condition that, of course, we get the DOT approval for the configuration you see before you. And at this point, I would be happy to entertain any additional questions to clarify anything that I might have missed.
Okay. Mr. Will.
I didn't notice on the plan any specifics to lighting. Are you using the existing lighting from the site?
Yes, I'm sorry. There currently exists two large light packs on the utility poles at either end of the site. We are proposing additional lights, small lights at the building for lighting the sidewalk and the parking area.
Are those lights at the end of the site, the large ones that are on tall poles, are those lights pursuant to DOT, New Hampshire DOT, or is that something that the site is pursuant to the site?
They are aimed towards the site, so it's pursuant to the site.
Have you looked into one of the other things besides motorcycle pads and snow storage and proper dumpsters,
Mhm.
placement, I think that the board, through our chair, has been lowering the height of the light posts so that there's less light pollution.
Mhm.
And I've gone by there an awful lot when I used to work at Merchants down the road, even at night, and that thing lights up from yards and yards away, and I can only imagine what it's like to live across the street. Have you looked into perhaps lowering the posts and changing the lighting structure in a holistic sense so that you can light your site so people can see what's going on, but it's not bleeding across the street and into the windows of the neighbors?
Also, we hadn't looked at making any modifications to those existing lights, and it hadn't come up in any of the technical review committees meetings, so
I did notice that, and I didn't know I didn't see it on the plan either, so I didn't know if you were going with existing lighting, and that's why I asked. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, to continue the discussion, what do we have to do to get these things lowered?
I would have to ask my client, if you don't mind.
Good evening.
Those lights have been there for 30 years. I believe, rent them from public service. We can contact them about lowering them. I don't think it's any big deal, but I think that they're lights, and we just pay monthly rental.
Yeah, we'd just like to try to, what happens is that what you have there is pretty much brightening up. Now we have an opportunity. You had a beautiful building that's going to be coming in here. We'd like to bring the lights down so you're lighting your building, and of course you're providing safety and security for the evening hours, but without flooding up the whole area as we have, and this gives us an opportunity to try to clean it up a bit.
I think it would make sense. I know that our interest in getting the big lights there was to illuminate the entrance. The northernmost entrance, which is the one that we're going to reduce, gets the most traffic. It would kind of make sense to me to leave that light, and we'll talk to public service about lowering the other one. Okay. The other one doesn't, we don't really need that up as high as it is.
Or even if we got that one turned off and you went with a couple of poles now at that end.
We'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Coker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A letter from John Kerrigan, I believe it is, has some items that are near and dear to my heart as a downtown resident. Construction hours, 7 a.m. is the city regulation. I am assuming, of course, you will adhere to that.
Yes.
And also dumpster pickup. That's not something that I understand is in your purview, but if Mr. Kerrigan is watching, I would encourage him to call the dumpster company. There is a city regulation which prevents dumpsters from being picked up before 7 a.m. And for the most part, they're pretty amenable to doing that. So, okay. But the construction hours, I'm assuming you'll follow.
I'm sure that'll be part of the site agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Topley.
Dennis, I was noticing some of the elevations on our site plan. Noticed that you've got the finished floor at 58.5 feet, and then I was noticing the sidewalk elevations, and it appears that we might be some 6 inches of difference between sidewalk and finished floor. I bring this up because of the new building would need accessibility at grade.
I have spot grades out the front of the sidewalk. In the middle of that point is 58.32. And the intent was no more than a 2% slope from the front door out to that point, and then gradually sloping it 2% or less away from that point to either side.
Okay, it just, again, keeping the project team aware that you're going to be able to roll a chair into the front door.
Right. And at 50, if you go from...
With a level area right. Adjacent to the doorway, so you need a platform. You can't be trying to open the door and roll away.
Okay, I see.
Just doesn't look like it will work with these grades.
Okay. We're only talking really less than only a couple inches really difference. in that area, so I think we should be able to accommodate that, easily with the landing required.
Any other? Oh, seeing none. Okay, last one I had was on snow storage. I didn't notice it on the drawing.
All right, I don't think I did indicate on the drawing, but snow storage would be, towards the end of this parking area here. Out at the end there would be the most logical place for them to push.
Okay, can I get those so noted on the map, please?
We will add that, yep.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone in the public like to speak to, for, or against this application? Anyone in the public, to, for, against? Third time? Seeing no one rise, I'm going to close the public hearing. What is your pleasure, board?
David? Mr. Chairman, the department doesn't have any particular concerns, given that the traffic safety was looking at this application today. So we just ask that you keep all the conditions in place. That way we'll make sure that New Hampshire DOT does respond and add any others that are appropriate.
Okay.
I guess one that would be appropriate sounds, rather, I'll wait for there's a motion.
Mr. Coker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it within our purview to ensure that the hours of construction are on the plan?
I think you could so note if you wanted, however, they apply to any project, so they're applicable. So if there was a complaint or if somebody needed to, we could go out and enforce it. It's a zoning ordinance requirement, so it's not in your site plan regulations.
So, but may we put it on as a stipulation, or?
Yes.
You can, but it's just saying it.
It's a redundant
It's
thing.
redundant.
Okay, thank you.
It's similar, for instance, you brought up the point of the dumpster. I know we've talked about that at other times, and it's the same thing. It would just be redundant. It is already in regulation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Will?
Yeah, to what degree can we stipulate the lighting height?
Actually, I just spoke briefly with Mr. Holden on that, and he's going to come up with some language.
My suggestion would be, once you have a motion, any rate that a lighting plan be reviewed and presented with sufficient lighting and low-level lighting, and have it reviewed by Lucy Tillman and Dave DeFossis.
We know what we want. We're trying to get them down
Mm-hmm.
to a certain height level,
Yeah.
and so basically giving power to them, so it
Sure.
doesn't have to come before us, and they can continue forward. Do I have a motion on the table?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval with the stipulations noted in the department memo and the additional stipulation concerning the site lighting plan.
Second.
And do we have one also for the notation, snow?
Snow storage, right.
Yeah, agreeable to the second.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Thank you. You're welcome. Moving on to C, the application of Berry Scientific Company, Inc., owner, and C&L Construction Company, applicant for property located at 20 Post Road, wherein site plan approval is requested for increasing the size of an existing parking lot and constructing additional water detention areas with related paving, utilities, landscape, and drainage associated site improvements. Said property shown on Assessor Plan 285, as Lot 9, and lies within an industrial district. Who'd like to speak to us tonight?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Patrick Crothers, C&L Construction, here for Erie Scientific. Basically, what we're proposing is adding 2 loading dock doors to the east side of the building, and associated paving and retention infiltration area.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Is there any additional lighting that's going to be required around these doors?
No, sir. We have a wall pack on the side of the building, and that should be sufficient for...
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please, Mr. Holden.
I'm assuming one of the concerns that TAC had was how we would handle the drainage system improvements to handle some additional concerns. My understanding is that you've basically agreed that you will construct a stormwater infiltration basin that will accept the entire volume of the 25-year storm, and that if this were to prove that it didn't work, that you would then work with the city to find another solution. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Just as a little further background, the applicant has been very willing to meet and work with the city and the abutters in regards to addressing a potential drainage problem that is larger than any one particular project. And I think it has worked out rather well, these discussions, and you have a memo from David DeFossos in that regards, and is representing the agreement that I'm mentioning.
Any other questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone in the public like to speak to, for, or against this application? Anyone in the public, second time, third time, on a closed public hearing? Public hearing is closed. What is your pleasure, board? Mr. Coker.
Chairman, thank you. Just a question, a procedural question. Stipulation that the applicant set up a meeting at DPW with the affected parties to identify a joint solution to the drainage issue. Just for the sake of discussion, what would procedurally happen if they could not reach an agreement?
They wouldn't be before you now.
So the agreement's already been reached?
Correct.
Oh,
That
all
was,
right.
that's the memo that he was just talking about and is in before you.
Oh, I didn't see that. I'm sorry. Was that in our packet?
Nope, it's on the desk.
The meeting took place, Tuesday of this week or so, and we have the memos corroborating the information that they provided.
I don't seem to have a copy of it, but that's okay. Thank you.
Okay.
That was yours. Okay. There it is. You got it there? Yep.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
I'll move approval. Would it be appropriate to put that condition in the record?
Yeah, subject to,
Memo from David Foster,
DeFossos, yes.
Dated,
dated 4/14/04,
very good.
at 11:23 a.m.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Chair votes aye. All set. Moving on to D, the application of Old Port Development Group, LLC, for property located at 126 State Street, wherein site plan approval is requested for the construction of a 19 by 22.5 addition to the rear of an existing building and add 1.5 stories to an existing section of building with related paving, utilities, landscape, and drainage associated site improvements. Said property is shown on Assessor Plan 107 as Lot 57 and lies within Central Business District. Who'd like to address us? Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is John Shagnon from Ambit Engineering, representing Old Port Development. Also here tonight is Steve Kelm, principal, and counsel Paul McEachran. The proposal is map 107, lot 57. It's a proposed 19 by 23 three-story addition, which will be on the Court Street side of the property. The property has frontage on State Street and also on Court Street. Additionally, in the middle of the structure that's there now is a two-story structure. We're going to remove the top story and put a 2.5-story addition in that middle section. That middle section will be sprinklered. The existing use of the property is 6 apartments and formerly a bar. The proposed use is going to be 7 apartments and commercial space in the back. On the Court Street side, the 3-story addition will be commercial space. The property's been upgraded with an 800-amp electrical service already, water and sewer. We're going to reuse the existing connections and replace piping inside the building. There's a proposal to put 5 parking spaces on the lower floor inside. Access would be off of Court Street on a 10-foot access way. The project received approvals from the Historic District Commission in February, received a variance on December 16th of 2003 for a 10-foot driveway, subject to one condition, and that is that the driveway be heated, and that is not a problem for the applicant. The project also went through the Technical Advisory Committee, and as a result of that meeting, there were 6 stipulations. Run through them briefly. The stipulations were that we work with the DPW regarding the curbing and sidewalk on Court Street. As you may know, there's an improvement project in the design phase for Court Street, and we'll be happy to work with the city, make sure that the curbing and sidewalks align with this project. Second stipulation is that the variance granted by the Board of Adjustment be listed on the site plan. It is now listed on the site plan on the lower portion of the page, just to the right of the left side. Third stipulation was that we work out a parking calculation. That is shown as note 11. And basically, the project was, I guess you would call it grandfathered when the downtown parking impact ordinance was passed, so the property has a baseline of, I believe it's somewhere in the vicinity of 78 spaces. The required parking for this project is 17, so therefore there's an excess and there's no unmet parking need as a result of this project. Fourth stipulation was that the site plan be reviewed for conformance with the HDC approval, which is not a problem. Fifth was that the Traffic and Safety Committee take up the matter, that the project be referred to them. We met with the Traffic and Safety Committee last Tuesday on a site walk. There was a large group that attended, took a look at the property, and then on their meeting this morning, they voted to recommend approval of the project, subject to condition that we work with the city, DPW, regarding the street sidewalks and access curbing issues, which is the tech stipulation number 1. And the second stipulation is that the heated driveway be utilized. In other words, that that it's put in and it's used, which is not a problem. The last stipulation from Technical Advisory was that we install a Knox box at a location to be approved by the fire department. That stipulation is also acceptable. Therefore, we believe we've met all the conditions. We ask for your approval here tonight. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions from the applicant this time, Mr. Will?
Actually, this is more of a question for the department. In the memo, in the middle of the first paragraph after speaking to the applicant, it mentions that the intent is to convert the uses to 7 apartments with some commercial space on the State Street side. To what degree is sides involved in the new ordinance for commercial space on the first floor? Like a use that has access to both, State and Court, or say State and Congress. I mean, to what degree do they have to have frontage that's commercial?
By the way the ordinance is proposed, it would be the ground floor areas would be commercial. So this would not technically be in conformance. However, it is filed in advance of that amendment, so it is in conformance under the present ordinance. They have provided some proposed non-residential space, and it is based on the Court Street side.
The other question is, to what degree of, I know the existing ordinance has something in it for percentage of the property being commercial. Is that correct?
No.
No.
Yeah, this
the
is
business zone is okay. I see.
Mr.
Thank
Hopley?
John, I'm a little bit confused between the plan, the TAC minutes, and what you talked about concerning sprinkling. You indicated part of the building is going to be sprinkled, or a portion of it already is, yet the plan shows a single water line. So if you could expound on that for me a little bit, please.
Sure. The fire department was represented at Technical Advisory, and the 3-story addition in the back is going to be separated by a firewall. and therefore will not need to be sprinkled. So the sprinkling will be in the 3.5-story section in the middle,
Okay.
because that's new construction.
And where is the water coming from for that system?
That's a good question. We may have to tap a fire service for that.
Because I believe the plan shows a single water line.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
you just might want to note that the water line is hooking to an 8-inch CI drain, according to the plan.
Uh-huh.
Is that a good thing?
Probably not, but I think it's a typo.
I think
It's a typo.
may be that it cuts it off. The water line, I believe, is just above it. It's just gotten cut off in the view.
Well, you have it labeled, the W for the water line, and then above it you have it captioned 8-inch CI drain. And that's right above the 18-inch drain.
Correct. So that should say water main.
And then,
Good point.
so there might be an additional service.
Yep.
Just out of curiosity, the use of the 3-story addition on Court Street?
It's unspecified commercial. We're using a 1 per 200 parking calculation. So it could be a professional office or a business office, or which would probably be the use. Although there's a surprising there's a lot of foot traffic out there, so it could actually support. And especially with the redevelopment of Court Street, it may prove to be a nice location for some sort of boutique or something like that.
Thank you.
Yep.
John, just to continue on that train of thought, any type of eatery or anything proposed for that, or would that not be allowed? Reason being, I'm thinking of grease traps and so forth.
Correct. If you were to put an eatery, you would need to provide a grease trap. There isn't sewer in Court Street, so that would kind of limit you in that regard. Right now, it's unspecified, so there isn't a tenant that has committed to the space.
What about lighting on the back of this? Anything for, since there's a driveway there, any type of lighting you're looking at?
That's a good question. I would defer, or I guess the project architect, I would have thought that would be part of the HDC process. I'm not sure, but certainly it may be appropriate to have some lighting at the garage entrance. It could be lighting that is utilized when people approach the door, sort of turns on with the door opener or something of that nature. It wouldn't be lighting that needed to be on all day, all night. It's not a parking lot, it's a driveway, so.
We're not talking about halogen, maybe a couple of spots that come on as a car is moving, and that's about it.
Yeah, it's not proposed to be lit all the time, and it doesn't have to be.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything? Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone in the public like to speak to or for or against this application? Good evening.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question about water drainage off of the building, because my husband and I own the building next door, and we intend to build right here.
Excuse me, just your name.
I was just curious.
Name for the record, please.
Oh,
And name and
Michelle
address.
White Seabarth. My husband's Walter. Just a question that you would answer that, right?
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
get them.
That's my only question, is just water drainage, other than that. So,
Okay.
because I don't want to, because it's going to come off the building this way into the two side properties. So I was curious to know how it was going to, watershed, I guess would be. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
John, you want to fill that?
I guess not, again, having been a part of the architectural process, the building is it's a zero lot line, it's in downtown. I would suspect that the roof drains are going to be connected in to some sort of a system that would direct it either to the back or into the storm drains in the street, and I don't know if the applicant has any more information on that.
Yeah, my name is Steve Kelm. I'm the property owner. When we had meetings with the HDC, this topic got brought up, and the discussion was we'll have gutters on the exterior of the building, and the drainage will come down and then be diverted into the interior of the building, and it will go down there out to the sewer. So the way the building's designed, it can come down the sides and then be diverted in to the parking area and then out to the drainage system. That will take it to the sewer system.
Into the sewer system or into the drainage, stormwater drainage?
Yeah.
You have to tie into that. Okay.
Drainage.
Any other speakers?
Well, Mr. Chairman, my name's Walter Zebar, and I own the property to the right of this. If he intends to put gutters along the building, and there's a zero lot line, it is my belief that the gutters would then be encroaching on my property. My understanding is that property lines is that they extend up to, I don't know, some undesignated height, but that's not something that I would be amenable because I still intend to build onto the back of this property. So somehow that needs to be addressed by them, I would believe. So.
Is your intent at some point to raise do a construction on your side?
Absolutely.
Which could then interfere with the gutters would be?
Well, my concern is that when that does happen, then the roofs that he intends to, they're going to pitch right onto my property. As of now, it's not a problem because it's a flat roof. But putting a pitched roof on is going to pitch into our property, and any kind of building that I intend to put up is going to have to deal with the watershed from him. So.
Okay. Thank you. John? Is there a way to keep these gutters so that it would collect the water and meanwhile staying on your side of the property line?
Yes. And that's exactly what was presented. Excuse me. That's exactly what was presented in the HCC package. It shows gutters that are inboard of the property line. So exactly.
We don't have privilege to that information, unfortunately.
Okay, but that's the answer to the question is most definitely that's a valid concern and will be addressed in the architecturals.
Okay. So you'd be amenable if that were made a stipulation at this level?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
John, could I ask a question? Are there any encroachments over the property line?
No, not that I'm aware of. The property line, as you know, there's a party wall here. This building is on the property line, or the building that was there that they're going to reuse the foundation of. In fact, there was the property was in the past. Was that
Starlight, was it?
Yeah, it was a Starlight Club. Yep. You'll see a little jog here.
Mr. Chairman.
It's only because Mr. Sullivan isn't here to come up with the old names, that's all.
There was a 1-foot jog, so at one point there was a boundary agreement. Maybe the lot line used to go through the building, but it doesn't anymore. It follows the face of the building. Does that answer your question?
Well, if there was an encroachment, you'd be responsible for it, or the owner and the applicants, not the city. You're assuring us there is no encroachment. We're approving it or acting on it, assuming there's no encroachment. So if there is, it'll be an issue between the owners of the property.
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone else in the public like to speak to, for, or against this application? Anyone else? Third time I close public hearing. Public hearing is closed. What is your pleasure, board?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would recommend that you keep the conditions that came out of TAC still active on this. And in addition, coming out of traffic safety, that there be additional notes indicating that they must continue to work with DPW on the sidewalk design in regards to Court Street. And also out of traffic safety, that there should be a note on the plan indicating not only will there be a heated driveway, but the tenants are also required to use that system.
Okay. Mr. Coker?
No, sorry,
Nope.
just sort of having my pen waving around.
Okay. Mr. Hopley?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of the project subject to the conditions in the department memo. I'd like to add also that the plan reflect a separate fire service out to State Street, and thereby relabeling the waters coming into the building as fire service and domestic. Should probably be corrected to show the water service as a water line and not a drain line.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second. Would you also be amenable to a stipulation that the gutters be added to be an internal and that they remain on the property?
Sure.
Also, that lighting would be for the driveway? Would be some spots, and providing a lighting plan to the department?
Yes. That's fine.
Madam Holden, second?
I assume that also covered the two from traffic safety.
Yes, the intent was that, yes, sorry.
Anything else? No? I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of consistency, I'll step down.
Moving on to E, the application of the estate of Anthony Giovanni for property located off Lang Road where a conditional use permit is requested as allowed in Article 6, Section 10, 608B of the zoning ordinance to allow construction of a two-story, 28-foot by 65-foot building upon a paved access way with an inland wetland protection zone, buffer zone. Said property shown on Assessor Plan 286 is Lot 22 and lies within a general business district. Who would like to address this evening?
I would, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Bernie Felich. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. To be brief, we were before you last month requesting a conditional use permit be either extended or a new application be granted. The board referred the matter to Conservation Commission for a report and recommendation and scheduled a public hearing for this evening. We appeared before the Conservation Commission last week, and they were even more supportive than they were 2 years ago when they made the same recommendation. They unanimously recommended approval of the conditional use permit. Comments from the Conservation Commission were that they endorsed this because the amount of impervious surface adjacent or in the buffer zone was being reduced, that this would provide some stewardship or oversight over what is now an unrestricted area which is subject to dumping by members of the public, and that they all saw this as a positive step in improving the wetlands buffer and the wetlands in that area. So we would simply ask that the board grant the same conditional use permit that it did grant 2 years ago and allow this matter to go forward again. As you know, Mr. Giovanni passed away before the site plan approval could be received, and as a result, everything came to a screeching halt pending the results of the probate court. So we would ask that you grant your approval, and we can go forward again. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none. Thank you. Anyone in the public like to speak to or against this application? Anyone in the public? Third time. Seeing no one rise, I'm going to close the public hearing. What is your pleasure, board?
I would make a motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions, comments, concerns? Not. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the chair votes aye. Item F, the application of Parade Office LLC for property located at 195 Hanover Street, where preliminary site subdivision approval is requested to subdivide 1 into 3 lots with the following. Lot 1 having a lot area of 28,515 square foot in continuous frontage off High Street and Hanover Street. Lot 2 having a area of 9,266 square feet in continuous street frontage off Hanover Street. And Lot 3 having a lot area of 175,470 square feet in continuous street frontage off Hanover Street, Maplewood Avenue, and Deer Street. And lying in the zone where a minimum lot area of 1,000 square feet and no continuous street frontage is required. Said property shown on Assessor Plan 125 has Lot 1 and lies within a central business district. Who'd like to address this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Corey Caldwell of Millette, Sprague & Caldwell.
on behalf of the applicant, Parade Office LLC. This is a 3-lot subdivision of the existing Parade Office Mall site. We have shown in orange in the middle of the plan, the Parade building. To the north, we have frontage on Deer Street, to the east on High Street, Hanover Street to the south, and Maplewood Avenue to the east. The purpose is to create 2 additional lots for 1 new building. Lot 1 would contain 28,516 square feet, or 0.65 acres, and is adjacent to High Street. Frontage would be off of High Street and Hanover Street. Lot 2 would be a much smaller lot, 9,266 square feet, or 0.21 acres, and would have frontage only on Hanover Street. The remaining land, which would house the Parade Office Mall, would contain 175,470 square feet, or 4.02 acres. Access to lots 1 and 2 would be via an access easement, as shown on the plan. This easement would run from High Street across the backs of lots 1 and 2 to the middle of the site, and then would extend in a southerly direction to Hanover Street and a northerly direction to Deer Street. It's important to leave the area to the north of lots 1 and 2 in an easement and not part of the lots, as currently that's the main entrance for the Parade Mall. Traffic comes to and from the Parade Mall, as well as the Hill Condominium utilizes that space. So we felt it important to leave that as part of Lot 3 and make it an access easement. The source of entrance for lots 1 and 2 would be from either High Street or Deer Street via this access easement as shown. There is no plan to open the curb cut on Hanover Street. However, we've extended this access easement to Hanover Street in the event in the future the city or the applicant wishes to open that. That would allow through legal access through the site from Hanover Street all the way to Deer Street. However, at this time and for this project, there is no proposal to open that street, but we felt it necessary to extend that easement to that point in the event that happens. We're here tonight only for a preliminary approval, as the design of the building is changing to incorporate HDC comments. As the building changes, the size of the lot will slightly change as well. We're close to a finalization on building dimensions. At that point, we will be back before you for a final approval. There would be some minor changes in area, perhaps dimensions to the lot as well. So again, you're here tonight only for preliminary approval, and I'd be happy to address any questions the board may have.
Mr. Will.
I'm not sure if I should direct this to you, sir, or to the department. Toward the Deer Street entrance, historically, when I've been on the board and we've seen brand new applications, we tend to try to make the exit and access point sort of match up, and instead of being offset. And that Deer Street entrance has been there for at least 26 to actually 30 years or more. And as you see people coming out trying to make a left or right, that seems to be a dangerous intersection where it just sort of catches up with Russell Street and the Sheraton Hotel. I'm not sure if that's within our purview at this time to suggest it as a means of preliminary approval, or if it's something that you're looking at of moving that entrance so it's just a straight access easement all the way to Deer Street instead of having that turn, that dogleg turn, and also maybe in the future the idea or having the ability, whether the applicant chooses to use it or not, but the flexibility to, in fact, maybe open that up into a street that joins Hanover and Deer. The way I believe that historically Fleet Street extended all the way to Deer Street.
Correct.
Don't quote me. John Sullivan isn't here to correct me. So
there used to be a street there, yes. Prior to the urban housing development, there was a through street there. And it did go out, as far as I know, approximately where it enters now onto Deer Street. However, we are having a traffic study conducted, and as part of that analysis with the traffic study, recommendations to that effect are to be made. We expect to bring that forward in the site review process.
And that will not be a part of the subdivision process?
Right. To keep legal access to these lots, we're showing an easement tonight only.
Okay.
But I expect in the site review process that very topic would come forward.
But wouldn't that alter the easement? I mean,
It
what we
would.
have here is
The
like a
easement would-
dog-leg easement
Right.
versus parking spaces that you have. And I'm wondering if we approve this evening, we're sort of shutting the barn door, after the horse is left. Maybe it's that analogy.
It's just preliminary.
But my question is more, not just to you as the applicant, but also to the department. I mean, is it our purview within preliminary or final subdivision approval to make sure that that easement has the ability to do what they're asking, that they potentially could be asking to do in the site review process? Or can that easement be adjusted through both processes?
The quick answer is yes. What they're doing right now is they're proposing to create the lots. I think it's highly appropriate for the board to go on record, though, as to what they're hoping this entire area will be developed. A lot of these issues would be addressed in site review. In discussions with the applicant, they are very concerned, for example, that orienting Fleet Street so that it went through would actually bring a lot of traffic in, which might not be what you wanted. But they're also cognizant of the city's desire, and I think their own desire, to encourage public access. So I think this is a work in progress, and I think what might be one way to address this is, if there is a motion to approve, would perhaps be to craft an additional stipulation that has the applicant and the department working together to address a particular concern.
Yeah, as long as we're looking at this with eyes wide open, that's the bigger issue. I just don't want to, limit us or tie our hands early in the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
And in the interest of giving you, I think, fair notice as to at least what my inclination is going to be, I'm sure you're likely familiar with the Northern Tier study, which I understand has been incorporated by reference in the master plan. The whole idea being to make sure that we have many appropriate and attractive means of access into the Northern Tier, and a limited easement would not be something I would envision as being appropriate. I understand there's a traffic study issue. There's also pedestrian issues. And those are things that I think we're all cognizant of and would look forward to working with you on in the future. And would ask that you take that into consideration and look at the Northern Tier study if you have not, because this really is a key to that area, I think, as far as the city is concerned.
Yeah, and thank you. That's a good comment. We have looked at that. We do have a very large development team, if you will, that has looked into that study, as well as we've started the process in working with the city to make what is best for not only for this site, but for the whole section.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recall when they closed that off, because that used to be the way I went home. I lived in the South End. Is it within the purview of this board to either recommend or encourage, or whatever the proper term, like we used require once before, which I wasn't comfortable with, to actually make this, instead of just a simple easement, to actually make this a city street?
I'm not so sure it would necessarily be in the city's interest that that be a city street. However, I think that is some of the issues that are being addressed as this site is developed. For example, in discussions with the applicant, they have no great desire to encourage more vehicles to actually traverse a rather significant lot versus having pedestrians actually traversing, going towards the Northern Tier, and also future development on this lot would probably preclude the street. I think what you're posing as a design problem is something we can get back to you, but I don't think I would do it at this point. You might want to raise it as a concern, have the department and the applicant address it directly, but at this point what you're looking at is creating two lots and ensuring that they have access in three lots out of one lot. And that is essentially to assist in the development proposal, then be back before you, which you can then use to address those concerns.
Two things, if I may. One is that if part of the presentation of making this into three lots, and critical to it, is the easement. So I guess that segues into my next question. We've been asked for preliminary approval. I have always been uncomfortable with preliminary approvals, Now particularly where, by the words of the applicant's representative, it's going to come back to us changed. How much changed? I don't know. But I don't know whether I'm saying one thing or another, but I'm just very uncomfortable with preliminary approval for something that may come back in a different form. That's all.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, just because it may resolve some of those concerns. This is a very complicated project. They've actually been involved in work sessions with the HCC that now nearly number 2 figures. And as such, it's been developed as 2 lots. And at some point, they have to jump and create the lots so they can be reviewed. So we have a chicken and the egg type problem, which comes first. And we've encouraged the applicant to seek the subdivision because that is what the longer range view of the project will resemble, so that you're getting your first snapshot at it. Meanwhile, they're continuing through an HDC process with works, probably with a public hearing coming up, so the exact location of every part of the building will be determined. I think, and you can confirm this with the applicant's representative, that when they talk about tweaking the lot, it's actually minimal changes to accommodate a design change that may have been occasioned by the actual public hearing by the District Commission versus a substantive change in what you're seeing before you. The easements are critical, but easements can be changed. Our trick is to make sure that each time we look at it, that the easements are doing what they're supposed to do, and in this case, they are.
And likewise, who determines what is a substantial change and not a substantial change?
You do.
Okay, so we grant preliminary approval, and there is a change. Then we'll leave to discussion whether it's substantial or minor.
Then it would still have to come back for final. And if we don't like the change, then we can either table it for them to address it again, or not approve it.
Okay, then it would behoove me to save this plan.
I think to simplify,
Yeah,
I think it provides the applicant a structure within which to work with other boards and commissions.
That's all it's doing.
Yeah, as opposed to you get an approval and then you move on to the next step. It's just a structure building exercise.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Paige.
Yeah, I just
Ms.
wanted
Robertson.
to comment for the other members might be interested to know that Mr. Colwell didn't mention that the way the lots divide is that Lot 1 will be, at least as far as we are in the process with the Historic District Commission now, Lot 1 will be the hotel section of the project, and proposed Lot 2 will be residential section. Just so that you know that that's kind of the way that they're breaking down at this point in the process. There hasn't been any final approval for the from the Historic District Commission, but just wanted to let you know about that.
Thank you. Councilor Furdy.
And just to make sure that I understand it, and it might assist if we could just affirm that we reserve all rights pending final site approval in terms of anything that comes before us.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know if this is pertinent or not, but where the 2 easements intersect, are we limiting ourselves to the type of vehicle that can maneuver through these 2 easements? I'm thinking if you get something larger than a UPS truck, you may have a difficult time navigating where that 25 feet intersects and possibly getting back out to Deer Street. Corey, I don't know if that's something, maybe I'm looking too far ahead, but...
No, that's a valid point. In the event a tractor trailer needs to go through there and make deliveries, turning that corner and maintaining its vehicle in the easement is not going to happen.
Correct.
And perhaps radiuses should be added on those curves in lieu of an intersection to accommodate such a thing. That's a good point.
I would concur. That's the only question I have.
Mr. Hopley.
Corey, I can't remember. Were you present at the meeting with myself and some of the other design team concerning the more building elements?
No, sir.
Okay. And this is really just a comment. It's really their choice, but just maybe a message to go back to the team to remind them again that with the creation of the lots 1 and 2, and as Paige pointed out, the tentative building design now with hotel on 1 lot residences on another. There probably will be building code issues, because now we have two buildings with zero lot line, zero setback on lot lines, and, they'll just have to conform to the building code. And it's going to be a window issue, or lack thereof.
To jump ahead just a little, one of the things that was recommended to us was a restrictive building easement to go 30 feet beyond these buildings for bay windows. Things that would extend beyond the building would have to be incorporated into an easement. On the final plan, there will be an easement to incorporate these such things. In other words, given that we have a zero lot line, if you have a sprinkler mounted on the face of the building, for example, that would extend onto the other lot. That would have to be incorporated into an easement. A bay window would have to be incorporated into an easement. So rather than have these individual little easements, we've been recommended by legal counsel to have a blanket 30-foot easement surrounding the building on the back and side to incorporate those things.
You mean 30 feet out from
the face of the
building? To the lot lines?
Out from the face of the building, yeah, which effectively would be probably the lot line.
Thank you.
Anyone else? For what I'm looking at here, with this drawing, are you proposing opening that access way on Hanover?
No.
From the start? The reason my concern is you have the curb cut that's open there. And I know you have the retaining wall that comes across, but for right now, you're not proposing in any way from this preliminary drawing to have that open onto Hanover Street.
That's correct.
Just when you go back and you talk to the traffic people, I, for one, would like it to see it remain that way. I too, raise the concerns that if you open that up, you're going to have people that are going to come off Fleet Street, go straight across, dump onto Russell, and they're off.
Yep. At a nice, long, straight, smooth section.
Correct.
Speeds capable of who knows.
Exactly. And however, I also agree with what Councilor Frieden was saying, that that is also an opportunity to really use that area right now to be able to open it up for a walking path, to open it up and make that as a gateway and entrance into this property to go up to the hotel, to traverse it, and to get to the other hotel as well. Mm-hmm. Also, I agree with Mr. Will's comments that if you can, looking at the small location map up here, and I know Russell comes up there, but I'm not sure how close that lines up.
I think it's about 200 feet.
10 or 15 yards.
It's about 150 to 200 feet.
Off center. Off center, so that couldn't be. Then you'd get into a.
It could be.
If it's too much dog leg, then you're getting into a traffic act, getting around. Where it is now, at least someone can get onto Deer Street and then take a left to get on.
Yeah, it could be made very close. However, as you come up Russell, you're facing one of the buildings on the Hill condominium. You'd have to go another 30, 40 feet roughly before you get to our property. So it could be made very close to a T intersection, but not a complete straight T.
Well, just if that can be looked at it in your traffic studies. Also, as was mentioned, for the turnaround for the trucks to be able to get in, to access in, but that also raises the concern of trucks going onto High Street. So as they're looking at that, I'd be very concerned about any trucks that could go onto High Street if all truck traffic can go back, coming off of Deer Street and then going back onto Deer Street, unless they want to traverse all the way over to Maplewood side. But I don't know if you want to send them all the way on through Lot 1. I'd prefer not.
I concur. That's not a viable alternative.
I guess that's all I have at this time. Anyone else? Councilor Frieden?
Just to make sure that I clarify, I think I'm in line with the thinking of the chair, and I just want to make sure that I understand that I am, because it relates to Mr. Ritchie's concerns as well. If you look at the sort of rather extreme jog that easement takes as it goes onto Deer Street, I presume what you're looking at is just having it empty on, perhaps going straight through or closer to it, and perhaps changing that configuration. Is that viable or not viable, or something worth considering?
The reason it takes the sharp bends now is to keep it out of the parking stalls. We're trying to utilize just the aisles that exist today so that we're not giving access rights to go through the parking stalls.
I think I understand that. I guess the question I have is, were you to go through some and then not put the road where it is, or the access way where it is intended, I don't know that you'd be losing any parking stalls. I think that's a wash, and it just seems to me an oddball design. Yeah. And that's my only...
And I agree, in the event, if it makes a safer access to get rid of some of those stalls and realign it, I agree. That's the best thing to do. Rather than to have sharp bends, a smooth transition would be preferred.
Because if it was let's just say you were going to put a hotel in there, I'm assuming you have tractor-trailer deliveries going into a hotel once, twice a week for food services, laundry services, et cetera. Let alone if you have residential benefits in there as well, moving vans, utilities, and vehicles, et cetera, delivery.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Will?
Yeah. I'm relatively satisfied in the sense that as much as I have concerns about the easements and we've been discussing them, I'm trying to bear in mind that this is preliminary approval, and I think it's just a matter of giving the applicant some sort of structure to work with. It's good to make sure that we notify the applicant of what our concerns are, but essentially it's not something we have to do this very evening. And by the same token, it's just because they put it in this particular place. I think it's just for the ease of putting something on our desks tonight, with the understanding that we're going to see something completely different for final approval, more than likely.
Right, and that's why we're just saying, if we can give, when they sit down with their traffic study people, if we can give them some of our concerns, that's headed off at the pass.
Yeah, I think that the only thing I can see as I see it as potentially use as a road, regardless of whether or not the applicant wishes it to be or not. I mean, people tend to go the point of least resistance, and I can see if trucks are using the easement on a walkway, that's going to create a problem. Or if it's a street, I can see pedestrians trying to use it to access some point between, Gillies and the Sheraton or the Portsmouth Herald, and I think that's just the way people are going to think. Mm-hmm. I think we have to be concerned about that. I think perhaps the other issue is looking at the reality of making it a street, with the idea that that's what people are going to have in mind anyway. And I'm big into putting stipulations on things and restrictions and all this, but I look at this and I think this is just too straight over too large an area, over too small a downtown, that someone, either in a vehicle or a pedestrian, regardless of one way or the other we do it, that someone is going to try to do one thing or the other. Especially with the tractor trailers you just mentioned. That's the thing that gets me the most, and that would be the only access way. We turn it into a pedestrian way, and now they're battling long trucks for it.
Well, it's not going to be. They're not proposing a sidewalk there. They're just saying that's
an easement.
That's going to be the easement, because they have to have a legal easement to be able to traverse over lot 1 to get out to the street.
That I understand, but what we've been conversing about here back and forth is the potential future of this easement, just to give them an idea of what our concerns are for when they come back with final approval. And as much as a walkway sounds nice, I'm just throwing this out too. I think that produces somewhat of a danger as well, because that may or may not be the access for a tractor trailer. I can't see how another tractor trailer could access other than using the easement. That's my only concern.
I don't think anyone's proposing for a walkway to go into it.
No, nobody's proposing anything at this point.
Okay. Anyone else? No. Thank you very much, Corey.
Thank you.
Anyone in the public like to speak to, for, or against this application? Anyone in the public to, for, or against this application? Third time, seeing no one rise, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I move to grant a preliminary subdivision approval as indicated in the petition.
Second, with stipulations.
With stipulations?
Yes.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Okay, that concludes our public hearings. Moving on to City Council's referral and requests. A public meeting is scheduled in order to solicit public comments on proposal to construction an addition to an existing pier on property located at 67 Ridge Court. The purpose of this meeting is to assist the planning board in preparing a recommendation to City Council pursuant to RSA 482-A3. Public meeting is open. Good evening.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Brad Lown. I represent Charlie and Melissa McLeod. They are here to seek your recommendation to the City Council to permit them to construct a dock with a ramp and a float on it. The specific issue before the board tonight is whether the construction as proposed would in any way affect the public use of the city's adjacent parcel, which some people refer to as a paper street. I have a plan here. I hope you can all see it. It should be large enough. The existing dock is located in the middle, and there are two other existing docks, one to the east.
Oh, yeah, you can remove that one.
Here.
Yep. I think there's a switch on it. You can use that if you want to walk over to it.
I don't see a switch.
It's on. You're all done.
All right, thank
Yep.
you. The existing dock that the McLeods, that was existing when the McLeods bought the property is in the middle. That has been there for about 40 years or so. When their predecessors in title purchased the property, there was a boathouse located on the shore, which was removed, and this dock was put in by Tony and Sheila Locke. To the east, there's an existing dock that we believe was built about 40 years ago by the Kinch family, and is now a public use. Some people refer to this as the Harvey dock. And to the south is the dock of Peter and Lee Vandermark. The statute in this case that governs the indicates that any docking facility that is going to be within 20 feet of an abutting line must obtain the consent of that abutter. Now, the regulation that was enacted consistent with the statute adds an important element to that, and that is that any portion of that docking facility must be at least 20 feet from the imaginary extension of the boundary line. The boundary line in question is the boundary line on the west side of the city's parcel that, if you extended over the water, would intersect with a portion of the ramp and float. So there is a difference between the statute and the regulation. Specifically, the regulation says that the proposed project must obtain the consent of the abutter, and the abutter should consider whether the construction represents a danger to other waterfront activities, a navigation hazard, or interferes with an abutter's access to or use of the property. Now, the current use of the city parcel is there are people in the neighborhood who use it. They walk down the city's parcel. They will launch kayaks. They'll go swimming, and they generally launch the kayaks straight out, and some people swim in this area. There's not a lot of swimming, but there is some kayaking that goes on in here. The proposal that the McLeods are making will have no effect on the public's use of that city strip in any way. They've been there for a while. They've never seen anyone swimming in the area where the proposed ramp and float would be located. The people would be free to come down and swim there as they do now. The public uses the so-called Kinch dock or the Harvey dock. This proposal will have no effect on that at all. The McLeods would be happy to even deed any interest they would have in that city parcel, in that paper street, to the city. So there was some initial feeling in the neighborhood that this would somehow affect the public's use of the Kinch dock. That is not the case in any way. The distance between the end of the Kinch dock and the end of the dock proposed by the McLeods is 39 feet, as you can see on the plan, and the distance between the end of the proposed McLeod dock and the end of the Kinch dock is 47 feet 7 inches, to give you an idea. The existing dock is going to be shortened, and it's going to be narrower than the existing one. It is going to be rebuilt up to standards. And so it's important, though, to note that the McLeods, as shorefront, as riparian owners, would be entitled to place a float or a mooring in front of their land without any approval from the city. It's their desire to rebuild this dock that triggers the statute that's cited in my material. We wrote to all of the members of the neighborhood to invite them to come and meet with us to talk about the proposal. We didn't have any takers on that. I sent everyone a letter explaining what the proposal was. But that's it in short. We believe the public's use of that city strip will not in any way be adversely affected, and we'd ask that you recommend to the council that this be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Applicant? Mr. Coker.
Mr. Chairman, Brad, thank you for this information. It's quite helpful. I have a couple of questions. Page 7, or item 7, I think you have towards the end, I'm confused about something, and maybe you can help me understand a little bit better. Item number 3 says the McLeods are entitled to a mooring or float without any approval from the city. If that's true, why are you here?
Because they would like to have a dock, which would give you access to the water straight from the land. They could have a float, but the reconstruction of the dock does require the approval of the abutter. Now, even if they were to attach a float to the end of the existing dock, I've spoken to the head of the Wetlands Bureau, he says that does trigger the statute. Although it's not crystal clear, it becomes a docking facility at that point that triggers the statute that requires that we get the city's consent.
Okay, and if I may have a follow-up, Mr. Chairman? Arthur Parrott was our former chairman, as you probably know, and when I first joined the board, Arthur told me to always look at things not for what they show you, but for what they don't show you. And that served me well over the years. If I understand what you're saying about, and we've gone over these paper street things ad infinitum, and I hate them, but this is one where the actual extension of the paper street has an impact on what you're saying, because it'll fall within that 20-foot boundary. I don't see on your submitted plan here, your drawing, or there, any extension of the property line or of the edge of the paper street out into the water on either side. So if you are asking this board member to make a decision about something, I don't feel as I have enough information because I don't know exactly where the edge of that paper street is, nor is it indicated. I mean, I have my reading glasses, so if it's on there, forgive me, but it's not on the plans that I see. May one assume, for the record, please, that the property line, the edge of the paper street is the property line as indicated on the left side of that?
Yes, on the west side. If you take a straight edge and just place it on that western border, you'll see that it will, the imaginary extension of that line will intersect a portion of the ramp and float.
Okay, and therefore it falls in within that 20-foot, buffer, if you will.
Yes, it does. I would point out that the Kinch dock is completely within the city strip, for what that's worth. In 1998, the city approved the upgrade and construction of the Kinch dock, which has not been done yet, but that is entirely within the city's paper street.
Agreed, but there was also some other considerations with that, so it wasn't done in and of itself. So I think that's an important fact to recall. So, okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Questions for the applicant this time? Seeing none. Thank you. Anyone else in public like to speak to or against this application? Excuse me. Not application. Anyone else would like to make comment at this public meeting?
Good evening. Not a well-versed public speaker, so bear with me. Just a brief statement. My name is Melvin Profession. I live at 49 Ridges Court. My friends would call me Sandy, so feel free to do so. And simply stated, we're just asking that whatever recommendation that the planning board makes to the city council, that it ensure and protect the overriding public interest, public benefit, and public use of Fernald's Court, its water access, and be consistent with the historical use of this property, and preserve its access to the public without obstruction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Sandy, do you have any more specific concerns? Do you have envisioned some nightmare scenario that public access would be restricted on this dock, or in the Harvey dock, or anything like that?
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that scenario?
It's a matter of personal trust. And if the properties were sold, who knows what future owners might do. But it really is a matter of personal trust between the neighbors, and that should be left.
And that's something that we as board members have to think of. I mean, many times, Sandy, we see applicants come forward, and they're nice people now, and they'll be nice neighbors for years to come, but they sell the property not to the next guy, the next guy, the guy after that. But 45 years down the line, you have public trust, but nothing codified in law. So my concern is this. We are neighbors now, so wouldn't it behoove us to make sure that when the property is sold, that neighborly agreement extends on to other future owners? And if that is the case, we as board members right now need to know what your specific concerns are. That way, we can impart them to your neighbors. The neighbors can codify that into whatever agreement we have. That way, everybody is on the same page, even 45 years in the future when they sell it to someone with horns and a tail.
Sure. Specific concerns would go back to, I don't have there was lack of clarity in terms of the ownership of the property. Does a paper street revert back to the abutters, and will they take ownership and cut off access to the abutters, to the neighborhood as it goes down the road? I think that was pretty much well resolved by council decisions back in 1998 regarding a specific another incident. The other fear is any type of docking or of boats in that particular area over a long-term basis, and it may or may not interfere, but that needs to be protected. The float does in fact come within, if you extend the imaginary lines, which could be easily clarified with a set of stamped plans as to the specific location of the dock, but as you extend the imaginary lines into the tidal waters, the float does actually enter in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, if you extend the imaginary property lines, which I assume would run parallel to the other property lines from Fernald's Court, half of, this dock, the existing, so-called Harvey dock, is, on the Harvey side of the property line.
So as I understand it, your concern is that somehow the paper street could be taken back to the property owner, and the second is, it's not in dispute that it's within the city's extended boundary, that the applicant, or not the applicant, but the person who's requesting this approval from the city council is not disputing that. Is your fear that somehow that public access to this particular proposed dock would be lost?
Well, there is no public access to this proposed dock, nor would I expect there to be. I mean,
Okay.
that's a fair statement. I don't want to speak on behalf of the petitioners, but the public access is with the existing dock. It's simply a matter of, I can't predict the future.
Okay.
An example of a obstruction that has occurred in the neighborhood last year was historically, people in the neighborhood put kayaks up against the woods and left them there until we got a call from the city attorney saying that there's been complaints and they have to be moved. And that was fine, so we moved them up to the edge of my property line, which is up here,
Okay.
if you will. That's an example of something that was unanticipated. Who can anticipate the future? I don't know. But, you know, whatever it's done or however it's worded, perhaps the conditions set forth in the petitioner's, number 6, if you're going to approve it, I mean, that's your decision, and I trust the board will protect the public interest. But perhaps those conditions would protect them. I don't know. I can't predict the future. I'm here on behalf of the neighborhood, several people in the neighborhood. The neighborhood currently has, within my house, one house away from me, there's currently 5 children under the age of 4 who will be growing up in the neighborhood and will certainly want to enjoy the access that's outlined in the pictures of the kids in the petitioners that my kids had and that my wife enjoyed back in 1964, 65. And other historical uses. You know, you want to preserve that integrity in an unobstructed manner that has gone on, that I can personally vouch for since 1965, through my wife. But so, and there's a young neighborhood. There's 5 kids in the neighborhood that are elementary and middle school that are going to use this area. So and I just became a grandfather. So there's a 6th kid. So it's imperative that we protect the interest, whatever the recommendation may be, to the city council.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Just want to point out also that, I don't know if this will alleviate any of your concerns, but in their opening remarks also was that they would give up any rights to the paper street.
And then I would assume would have to be spelled forth in this recommendation from this board to the city council and adopted by the city council.
Yeah, that would have to go forward if that was the way the agreement worked out. But I just think that the applicant or the owner of the land there also is willing to work with not only the city but the neighbors too. It sounds like. And this
would sound like one of those future owners' horns and tail clauses.
That's how we can handle it.
Well, I mean it's certainly, I don't know whether it be future. There's certainly, I don't think it's any secret. There's no love lost between me and the McLeods. It is what it is. And
we try not to air that here.
Yeah.
And I just want to highlight that I'm not concerned about future owners personally, but it's a matter of, like I said before, personal trust.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Good evening.
Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board, I'm Harold Whitehouse. I live at 58 Humphreys Court. I guess by the way the crow flies, I'm probably 600 to 700 feet from the applicant's proposed dock issue. But, and some people get upset with me, being an old South Ender. When I see changes, I speak out. But a lot of people come to me and want me to speak out. They're afraid. They're afraid that their little unique way of living in the South End, and they've been there for years, They're afraid of the quaintness of the south end will be changed, and I try to assure them that construction and development is good to a certain extent, and people come to the south end because they love it there and they appreciate what we have. So that's why I come before you quite often when I see a change coming up in the south end. Now, this proposed dockage, ramp, and float, the first time it came before you, there was a 20-foot distance between the Harvey float and the McLeod proposed float. Now, that was very close dimensions because people were wondering if they would be able to get out exiting Fernal Court, which is a paper street, the end of the paper street, onto the back channel and out into the beyond the breakwater and into the river. And that's an ideal spot to launch kayaks. But I've seen in their proposal plan now, they've removed the float from the Harvey dock, and they've kept the float in the proposed McLeod dock, so therefore the distance is a little greater. According to the the attorney representing him, it's 39 feet. So we kind of support that, and I support everything they're trying to do. And all I'm saying is take a long, hard look at all our paper streets, our access, our paths, our roads to our waterfront. And I'm referring not only the back channel, but Little Harbor, Sagamore Creek, even the North and South Mill Pond. They're very, very precious to us. Please do not lose these little access and rights of way to these waterfront areas. It's very important. I would like to suggest, if you do approve of this grant, of this application, that you write into the motion or be part of the motion, Article 6, which was drawn up by their attorney, and I will read it. The McLeods will agree in writing in any form prepared by the city attorney to take no action which would in any way restrict the public's right of access to the shoreline along the paper street, and would agree not to moor any boats in the swath of the land extending from the paper street out onto the water. The McLeods would similarly agree to consent to any reasonable use or construction by the city on its parcel. And I think this would be very important to work into the motion if you plan to approve of the proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, very brief, Whitey? Yes. Yep, very briefly. I'd asked Sandy, let me ask you the same question I asked Sandy. Do you see any potential problems, not with this particular owner, but in the future? What are your major concerns?
No, if this, what I've just read is briefed and in the motion or drawn up by the city attorney and presented as a final package to the city council.
And that should alleviate any concerns you may have?
That's right.
Okay. Thank you, Whitey.
Okay. Anyone else? Second time?
Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, the 20-foot distance was an engineering error. Originally, it was just not measured correctly on the plan. That evidently got people in the neighborhood upset, but it is not meant to involve this float at the end of the Harvey dock. This is the actual proposed measurement here. The 20 feet was just an error, and we're sorry about that. I'm glad that Councilor Whitehouse spoke here, and Mr. Trevathan, and we certainly have no objection to the board's contingent approval to include that stipulation that's in the memo that I've submitted. We would agree to all that in whatever form is prepared by the city attorney. I would point out that there are currently boats that are moored right in that path that is defined by the boundaries of that city parcel. We're proposing not to put a boat in that area if the proposal is approved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Questions for Mr. Coker?
If you would, could you clarify something for me? Thank you. Page 3, the department shall limit the location of a project to at least 20 feet from an abutting property line or imaginary extension thereof, et cetera, et cetera. I'm somewhat flying blind because I don't have solid stamped engineering drawings. But my quick assessment of this with this handy-dandy little Altus engineering ruler here shows me that the vast majority of this dock is within the 20-foot boundary of that imaginary line.
Yes. Yeah, we agree. It's only the base of the dock that is slightly more than 20 feet from this boundary. This is slightly over 20 feet here. But you're quite correct. If you extend this line, almost the entire structure is within that 20 feet, which is what brings the statute into play, and which is why we're here, is because we need the abutter, the city's approval after consideration of these factors we've discussed. Does it interfere or impair or adversely affect the abutter's use of that property? And I would also point out that we have the written consent of the other two abutters, which is in my packet. So we're here because we believe that this proposal will have no adverse effect at all on the public's use of that shoreline.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify to make sure, again, because of the drawings.
You're quite right. You're quite right.
Thank you.
Councilor Frame.
I don't know if I can articulate this properly, but do we know what the depth of the water is at the shore at high tide, and then where the mean low tide water line is, and where that falls in relation to those piers?
Yes, at low tide, this is mud flats. This is all mud flats. You'd have to walk out quite a ways to find some standing water at low tide. And at high tide, the water will come up to the beach here, right, roughly where my pen is, if you can see that, and to the almost, well, I guess to the base of the existing dock.
At low tide, Brad, is the float or the proposed float, would that be on the mud?
Yes. Yes.
Anyone else? Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Second time? Third time, I'm going to close the public meeting. Public meeting is closed. David, did you have a letter you could read in, or?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we have, and board members have received a letter from Kathleen Thompson. It's stamped in on April 13th, and she indicates that this is a part of the record, and I'd ask that board members had seen that.
Okay. Just read it in.
Also, Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to talk to this application when you're ready.
Please.
The department maintains some concerns with this particular application, and what it largely revolves around is the extension of the street right-of-way. The city has not given up its interest in Fernald Bridges in this street, and it's primarily for the purposes of public access and egress through at the end. What I am hearing, though, is an offer by the applicant to deed or provide to the city whatever rights they may have in that right-of-way, which tends to enhance the city's ownership. And the principal concern the department has is actually that if you extended that right-of-way, it does bisect the dock. So how can you argue that it does not that it has no impact on the public's access? The regulations further state that it should be 20 feet. I, for one, am not going to be the one recommending to this board tonight that you should ignore state regulations. However, in talking with the applicant's attorney, and if you can look at that map, there's also, you have a right to get to the water. You have a right to not impact your other neighbors. So it seems like the city or this board is looking at sort of a Hobbesian choice. It's going to be very difficult. What I'm hearing, though, is a willingness to try to negotiate, and my suggestion would be is that you still table this, but you table this so that the department and the legal department can perhaps work out some understandings, and I would ask that you encourage the applicant that they eliminate any infringement into the right-of-way area as it would extend, and to seek some compromise that might affect the 20 feet so that we have one that probably maximizes the public's interest and minimizes impact on adjacent properties. I don't know what that figure is. I don't know what that configuration might be. But I think that might be a way to start structuring this so that we can meet the interests of all parties involved.
Mr. Coker.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, when I went down there and looked at this, I was struck by the very narrow band of sand that was there. And if one were to take the city's right-of-way and put the sand and literally create a beach, you'd basically cover the vast majority of that dock. So I guess I'm really not very comfortable with the city giving up rights to public access, which I'm sensitive and really would like to protect as much as humanly possible. So David's point is well taken. Perhaps there's something else that can be done. I don't know. Again, the drawings, maybe this dock could be moved over some. I'm not sure. Maybe they could work a deal with the Vandermarks or something. But as this is presented now, I am not comfortable with it at all. And I would, in fact, we'll be voting against moving it on to the city.
I think the city council, the department recommendation at this time is that we table it to allow for legal review and negotiations to take place.
Yeah, but we haven't made that proposal at this point.
I'm just saying that that's what the recommendation is.
Okay.
Mr. Walton.
Mr. Farine.
I'll make the motion to table and send it back to us, and I sort of look at it this way. This is in the nature of a preliminary site plan review, and if we put the motion on the table to table it until the next meeting, there's some things that I would like information from the city on. Also, perhaps a few other requests of the applicant, and so with that, I make a motion.
Don, I was going to say, point of order. I did want to make a comment that before we move to table it, that I think Don's point is well served, that this is not a site review application, so
Correct.
we don't have any sort of special maps that are right down to the last foot. We really need some more specific maps, and I think that should be a part of the tabling motion, whatever tabling motion we have. And that's all I have.
I'll make a motion for table, and then perhaps discussion would allow for the addition of stipulation.
Yeah, well, we don't have...
Not stipulations per se,
Yeah,
but...
can't have discussion on tabling motion.
That's why we want to mention it now.
However...
then I'll make a long motion with everything included.
You can't ask for what information you're looking for while it's being tabled. That would allow for legal review,
Yes.
maybe more better drawings to show what lines...
May I begin a list? Yeah. I think a drawing that accurately reflects where the property line would bisect the dock and or the float. I would like to have a little bit of legal information on the history of what I vaguely recall as being a somewhat celebrated cause regarding this right-of-way going back in time, because it does seem to be a publicly contested issue. And I would like the city legal, besides looking at the statutes and the regs, to also offer what local ordinance zoning laws or other directives also relate to this, so that we may consider them all at the same time. And my motion is open to suggestion in terms of others who might add additional items.
Before a second is made.
In addition to that, a suggestion to perhaps relocate the dock to minimize the infringement, if that's possible to do, minimize the infringement on the city's right-of-way.
Look at alternative locations.
Alternative locations.
Analyze alternative locations. And if we can,
I have no objection to that addition to my motion.
if we can, spice up the language for the drawing, I think if we are too specific, and I just want to know what the distance is, I think we really have to have some sort of engineering quality drawing. I'm not sure what language we would use to do that, and perhaps other board members can assist me in that, but I would feel more comfortable we know the distance between everything and everything.
A drawing in the nature of a site plan. It's not a site plan.
Sounds good.
And one that shows low and high tides.
That's a good suggestion, too.
Is there a second?
Yeah, and water
Oh,
elevation.
I got one more suggestion.
Please do.
In some of the documentation that was provided, there was some discussion, if I'm correct, if I'm not mistaken, that is, as to the difference between this imaginary lot line extension out over the water, keeping the same bearings as the lot lines are on land versus changing the bearing to a perpendicular direction over water. Because if you were to take the tact of maintaining the same bearing for this particular parcel, that yields a very shallow triangle.
Correct. I was thinking the same thing.
Versus if you were to go perpendicular to the water's edge.
And that's something I would like to see in legal terms of how is that looked at. I agree with you. I think it should be perpendicular.
I think somewhere between
Certainly.
Because otherwise, you've just left a little triangle there, and they've absolutely no.
And it's all a factor of the angle at which the land lines intersect the water.
We'll have to get our protractors out, and
here we go.
Uh-oh, rusty geometry.
Anyway,
weapons of math instruction.
It has been tabled to our...
I'd suggest the next regular meeting.
To our next regular meeting?
Would be May.
With looking
20th.
for some information back. Brad, if you need that list, if you didn't get it all, we'll have it available at the department. Just give her a couple of days to work it up.
May 20th.
So it's been tabled to our May 20th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Okay, under old business, 126 Spring Street, request of Margot R. Belandry for an extension of conditional use granted on June 19th, 2003, extended approval to June 19th, 2005. This was one for conditional use. Basically, she had a contractor work out on her. She's trying to get a new contractor in and get things going. This is their first time through.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. And David, unless you have something more, I'm going to ask for adjournment.
I think probably Cindy, you have some materials that you wanted, or we'll be talking to you about the master plan. Remember your meeting on the 29th? Have materials for you. Other than that, we actually have very little for you at this point.
Yeah, we just provided you with revisions based on previous meetings that you have, so you should all have those copies that you can use as your current working copy to bring on the 29th.
Okay.
Excuse me, David, what meeting's that on the 29th? That'll be a meeting of the Land Use Committee, which is the board as a whole. And that'll, we'll get a reminder out. I can't remember if we set it up for 7 or not. I think we did. I think it's 7 o'clock in our conference room. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And what we want to do at that meeting, David, is review all of the recommendations, any final input on them, not just land use section.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go home and find out if it's Kwame or Bill.
This says it's
Adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Hope this,
Aye.
since
Good night,
bringing
everyone.
us this kind of,
Let the record show Bob Ducharme was listening.